Good morning, Montgomery Bell Academy. Can you all hear me okay? Great. So I imagine that this is a beautiful fall day in Nashville, Tennessee, and I wish that I was sharing this time with you in one of America's most exciting and imaginative cities. But instead, I am here in Johannesburg, social distancing as you are in Nashville, and as we unite across the world to fight a global pandemic. I've been asked to share with you a little bit about my journey and perhaps a lesson or two. And I think, as Mr. Joya mentioned, I should start by mentioning that I grew up in circumstances not too dissimilar or distant from your own. I grew up in Kalamazoo, Michigan. In my childhood, I had my first job in Cincinnati, Ohio. But for the past 16 years, I've lived here on the African continent, in the wonderful city of Johannesburg, building an educational institution called African Leadership Academy. And we bring together the most promising young leaders from all backgrounds across Africa for their junior and senior years of high school. So the Academy began as a dream hatched in a classroom at Stanford University with my friend Fred. I think you can probably see him. He's in the red sweatshirt. And we had a belief that the most important enabler for peace and prosperity was leadership and the quality of Africa's leadership. We believed that we could build a unique, mission-driven school that would nurture and develop leaders who would shape an entire continent's future. And now for 13 school years, 1,500 exceptional young people have come through our doors from Morocco to Madagascar, from the children of famous diplomats to orphans of armed conflict. And all have been selected to ALA because of their potential for leadership. Now, we built ALA to develop leaders. We fundamentally believed that we could teach leadership. But I suppose the thing that I'd like to share with you today is that the process of building ALA has taught me a lot more about leadership than I ever imagined it would. It has truly reshaped the way in which I think about and engage with the world. When I arrived in Africa, my fancy degrees, I have a degree from Yale, I have 2 from Stanford, my powerful United States of America passport, my experience, my networks, they gave me a false confidence, false sense of security. I believed I could solve any problem. I had access to exclusive communities, and I quickly met some of the most influential people in Africa. I suppose that there were elements of my identity, some might call privilege, that commanded or enabled a certain degree of respect or access. And so it was really easy to fall into a trap of believing that I had the answers and to imagine that I could recognize or evaluate leadership with criteria like those I had come to understand as a student at schools like yours. Can someone write English with precision? Can someone evaluate data and capture insights? Have they read widely? Do they have a firm handshake and look you in the eye? These were the things that I had learned to value in school. They were important. I valued them. I still do. But I'd like to tell you about 2 young men of many who've changed my conception of leadership. Their names are Joseph Munyambanza and then Takamaze Nzianvir. When I met them, they were boys of about your age, refugees from the Democratic Republic of Congo, living in Changwali refugee camp in Uganda. Their families had fled armed conflict to this refugee camp when they were young children, 3 and 4 years old. And Joseph and Ntakamaze had made their way through overfilled local schools by spending the weekends tilling fields for farmers for spare change, and then pooling their resources, scraping by, committed to making something of themselves and serving their families. Now, to be very clear, when I met Joseph and Ntakamaze, their English was objectively poor. They were 17 years old, but their mathematical fluency was well behind that of an MBA 8th grader. Their school grades at age 16 were okay at best, but I don't think any of you would be proud to show their report cards to your parents. They did not project a particular confidence when they spoke. I don't even remember them looking me in the eye when they first shook my hand. They did not meet any of the markers of leadership that I had been taught to look for. But they came to ALA strongly recommended by a social services organization in Uganda that I knew well. I'll never forget, a local man in Uganda wrote to me in 2008 saying, "You will never forget, you will never regret inviting Joseph to your academy." I trusted him. So he sent an offer of admission to this young refugee with the wonderful smile, who'd sent us with his admission pack a photograph of himself holding a hoe, who had poor grades but a great story of grit and commitment. 2 years later, this young man, Joseph, graduated from ALA. He was much loved by his peers for reasons that we'll get into later. But universities across the world looked at Joseph according to his limitations. Admissions officers saw him as a risk, and an expensive one at that. He came from a non-traditional background. He required full financial aid, a full scholarship, to be able to enroll in any university. He didn't interview particularly well. He was quiet. He was different. He was very difficult for an admissions officer at a great university like Vanderbilt to understand. His examination grades weren't great either. While universities saw D's on his A-level exams and thought he can't compete, I saw someone who had covered the content of about 4 years of school in less than 2 years and had managed to pass 3 of the most rigorous subject exams for high schoolers in the world. I'd never seen anyone in my life learn as voraciously as Joseph. After Joseph graduated, it took us 18 months to find him a university place. He was desperate to attend university such that he could show others in his refugee community what they could achieve as well. And in the process of trying to get him to a university, I called everyone I could think of in my network. Ultimately, Westminster College in Missouri offered Joseph a space. When he got there, he graduated a semester early with a 3.9 GPA in biochemistry. And he was voted by the faculty as the outstanding senior in class of 2015. Buoyed by Joseph's success, Ntakamaze went to the University of Rochester, one of the finest research institutions in the world, and completed a degree in mechanical engineering. Today, I consider Joseph and Ntakamaze two of my greatest role models and teachers in the world. I can tell you with conviction that the quality and depth of their thinking and their ability to mobilize individuals and resources is perhaps more impressive than anyone I've met in my entire life. By the time these boys were 18 and before they had finished high school, they had built a primary school in Changwali refugee camp to serve other children like themselves. Today, that in Africa. But more to the point, that school is one of the best schools I've ever visited in my life. And I've had the privilege of spending much of the past 20 years visiting schools, including your own. I know that if I, the guy with the fancy degrees and the privileged passports, tried to build a school in a refugee camp, that I would spend at least 10 times the money, and I would be lucky to get half the results. Children leave the refugee camp now for college in droves, following the lead of Joseph and of Ntakamaze. That's not all, of course. They've built women's empowerment groups. They've built a microfinance entity. They've built other small businesses that are empowering young refugees. They've received tremendous press attention in the past couple of years. They are friends and collaborators with people I've never met. Gordon Brown, the former UK Prime Minister, Malala Yousafzai, the Nobel Peace Prize recipient, 50 Cent, who sponsors students at their school. They saw something was possible, and they made it so. And as I described before, they have been among my greatest teachers. So why have I just told you this long story about Joseph and Ntakamase? There are a few reasons. First, I wonder how many people like Joseph or Ntakamase have crossed your paths in Nashville, or will cross your path when you go off to college. And when they do, how will you respond? Will you write them off because they don't meet the high bar of an MBA man in all the ways in which you imagine an MBA man? Or will you pause and get to know them, recognizing their difference, not better, not worse, and imagining their abundant potential? Second, I wonder if you've taken the time to imagine, to really imagine how leadership looks or how it sounds to you. When I say leader, change maker, genius, who do you think of? How do they look? How do they sound? Perhaps you thought of Abe Lincoln, or Bill Gates, or Barack Obama. My guess is that you're imagining individuals who might look a certain way, or might sound a certain way. And when we imagine that as our conception of leadership, how many extraordinary people are we ignoring? Like me, gentlemen, you are immensely privileged. You probably recognize yourselves as beneficiaries of an extraordinary education in Montgomery Bell. You likely know that you will be members of an elite network of MBA alumni. You are men in a global society that still wrongly prizes our contributions over those of our sisters. Such privilege can induce blinders. It can cause you to recognize and imagine merit in others in the ways in which you demonstrated amongst yourselves. Worst of all, it can cause you to miss extraordinary individuals and their contributions right in front of your own eyes. Your brain and its unconscious biases risk preventing you from seeing the magic in others all around you. One day, perhaps, you will come across a or an Ntakamase. Will you pay them mind? Or will you be turned off by their slow and deliberate way of speaking? Will you see their limitations as writers or mathematicians as evidence that they are not the kind of leader who is worth your time? Or will you see them as partners in creating something great for which their strengths might complement your own? My time in Africa has taught me that leadership is an abundant resource. It does not only come in the package that you're accustomed to seeing at MBA or that I grew to value at Yale. When we see leadership as abundant, when we dare to imagine the equal humanity of every person, the equal agency, the equal potential, no problem is too big for humanity to solve. And I hope all of you will go forward with the humility to recognize in others of different backgrounds in your hometown and across the world a potential that is equal to your own, such that you can work together and create the world on which you dream to live and work over the course of your lives. Thank you very much.